Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, the Week 11 AP Top 25 poll is out, and I'm going to go over the rankings for this week and see what I think about them. Houston is the number one team, and they beat South Florida this past week, and Houston's playing really good basketball this year. They only have one loss, and if Houston keeps winning in American Conference play, they will definitely stay the number one team unless Kansas keeps winning big games in the Big 12 and they'll overpass them. Kansas is at number 2 and they only have one loss, and they beat Oklahoma and Iowa State this past week. And Kansas, they've been very dominant so far in the Big 12 this season, and if they keep winning big games in the Big 12, there's a really good chance that they could surpass Houston for the number one spot, or if Houston loses, Kansas can get the number one spot that way as well. Purdue's at number 3 and they beat Nebraska this past week, and Purdue only has one loss, and these three teams are definitely deserving at the top 3 spots in college basketball right now. Purdue has had a great season so far, and they definitely deserve to be where they're at. Alabama's the number 4, and they won at Arkansas this past week, and they beat LSU. And Alabama only has 2 losses, but they're playing better and better basketball as the season's gone along. And if Alabama keeps winning and one of the teams in the top 3 slip up, Alabama can definitely move up. UCLA's at number 5, and they beat Utah and Colorado this past week. And UCLA has been playing great basketball. They've won 13 games in a row. And if UCLA keeps winning in Pac-12 play, they can move up as well. Gonzaga's at number 6, and they won at BYU. That was a close win, and then they beat Portland this past week. Gonzaga, all their games are now in West Coast Conference play. And if Gonzaga can keep winning in their conference and not slip up, then there's a really good chance that Gonzaga could keep moving up if other teams ahead of them slip up. Texas is at number 7, and they won against TCU, and they beat Texas Tech this past week. And Texas, without Chris Beard, is finding ways to win. They haven't won a lot of games very dominantly, but they found ways to win over really solid teams in the Big 12. Almost every team in the Big 12 is a good team. So if Texas can keep finding ways to win in the Big 12, they can definitely move up. Xavier's at number 8, and they're a big mover. They moved up 4 spots, and they only have 3 losses. And Xavier's not lost since November, and they beat Creighton and Marquette this past week. Xavier's been fantastic this season in Big East play. They're the only team that has not lost a game in the Big East, and they only have losses to Indiana, Duke, and Gonzaga in November. If Xavier could keep winning in Big East play, then Xavier can definitely keep moving up in these rankings. And Xavier is worthy of being a top 10 team at this time. Tennessee's at number 9, and they won against Vanderbilt, but they lost to Kentucky this past week at home. Tennessee has 3 losses, and at times Tennessee has looked like a fantastic team, but they've also had some games where they really struggled, and that was a tough loss to Kentucky at home. That was a game that you probably feel Tennessee should have won, but Tennessee for now still is a top 10 team. Virginia's at number 10, and they beat UNC, and they won at Florida State this past week. Virginia's been playing some pretty solid basketball. They've had a few games this season where they haven't looked like a top 10 team, but with all these other teams losing, Virginia moves back up to number 10. Arizona's at number 11, and they won at Oregon State, and they lost at Oregon this past week. Arizona is a team that's hard to figure out. At times, Arizona's looked like one of the top teams in the country, but at times as well, Arizona's really struggled. They have bad losses to Oregon, Utah, and Washington State. Besides that, they played really well this season, but Arizona's still a top 15 team. But if they keep losing to bad teams, they'll definitely move down further. Iowa State's at number 12, and they won against Texas Tech, and they lost at Kansas this past week. Iowa State's been a surprise team this year. TJ Otzelberger's done a fantastic job as head coach. Iowa State was a surprise team last year, but they've continued that this year as well, and they almost won at Kansas, and that was a really tough loss for Iowa State. But they definitely have a top 15 resume right now. And if they keep winning in Big 12 play, they can move up even further. Kansas State is at number 13, and they only have 2 losses, and they've been the other surprise team out of the Big 12 this season. Jerome Tang's in his first year as head coach, and he really has the Wildcats playing great basketball. They won against Oklahoma State this past week. They did lose at TCU. That was a tough loss. That was their first bad performance that they've had in a long time. But TCU is a really solid team, so it wasn't really a bad loss, but it was definitely tough how poor Kansas State did play in that game. But Kansas State still deserves to be in the top 15 for sure. TCU's at number 14, and they lost at Texas, but then they won against Kansas State. TCU's been struggling in their last couple of games, but they were able to bounce back with a big win over Kansas State, and that will definitely help out TCU as they continue to navigate through Big 12 play. UConn's at number 15, and they lost at Marquette, and they lost to St. John's this past week. UConn started the season 14-0, and they were ranked number 2 in the country right behind Purdue, but UConn's lost 4 of their last 5 games. They're now down to number 15, dropping 9 spots from number 6 this past week. UConn's really struggling right now. They look like a top 5 team in college basketball at the beginning of the season, but now UConn's really struggling. If Dan Hurley can get his team back on track, UConn can definitely move back up, but if they keep losing, then UConn will keep moving down the AP top 25 poll. Auburn's at number 16, and they won at Ole Miss, and they won against Mississippi State this past week. Auburn's been playing better basketball lately. They only have 3 losses, but earlier in the season, Auburn was really struggling and almost moved out of the top 25, but Bruce Pearl has really stabilized his team, and Auburn's been playing better as of late, and they definitely deserve to be in the top 20. Miami's at number 17, and they've lost 3 times this season, but Miami still had a really good season, and Jim Larinaga has a really good team this year. They won against Boston College, and they lost at NC State this past week, and NC State's a really solid team, and that was a tough loss in overtime, but Miami, for the most part, has looked like a top 25 team this season. Charleston's at number 18, and they only have 1 loss, and they won at UNC Wellington this past week. That was a good win. Then they won against Elon. Charleston will continue to stay in the top 25 if they keep winning, but if they lose, they'll definitely drop out of the top 25 because they have a smaller margin for error being in a smaller conference. But Charleston has had a great season, and I'm glad the AP voters are giving them some recognition. Clemson's at number 19, and they won against Louisville, and they won against Duke this past week. A lot of people were wondering why Clemson wasn't ranked last week, and I definitely understand why people were wondering why Clemson wasn't ranked. Clemson did have some bad losses early in the season, but Clemson's playing better basketball now, especially with a lot of other teams losing. Clemson finally gets the recognition that they deserve, and that was a really great win over Duke, and now they're ranked at number 19. Marquette's at number 20, and they won against UConn. They lost at Xavier this past week. They move up 5 spots in the poll, even though they lost at Xavier, and even though Marquette has 5 losses as well, Marquette's been a fantastic team this season. Shaka Smart really has Marquette playing great basketball, and they have a really solid resume with a lot of great wins, and that's why they're ranked in the top 20. Baylor's at number 21, and they won at West Virginia. They won against Oklahoma State this past week. They have 5 losses this season, and Baylor even fell out of the top 25 poll for brief. But Baylor, they're starting to stabilize a little bit. Scott Drew has Baylor playing better basketball right now, and they can definitely start moving up in the top 25 poll if they keep winning. Providence is at number 22, and they have 4 losses this season. They moved down 3 spots because they lost at Creighton, the only team that they played this past week. And Providence was undefeated in Big East play, and that was a really tough loss at Creighton. But Ed Cooley's still done a really solid job at Providence this season, and they still have a top 25 resume for now unless they keep losing. Rutgers is at number 23, and they enter the top 25 poll, and they have 5 losses, but they won at Northwestern, and they won against Ohio State this past week. Rutgers is a really solid team. Steve Pikiell's done a fantastic job of turning the Rutgers program around. They're playing really good basketball right now. And with the Big Ten beating up on itself, Rutgers is only the 2nd team outside of Purdue from the Big Ten that's actually ranked in the top 25 poll right now. But if they can keep winning in the Big Ten, they can definitely keep moving up. Florida Atlantic's at number 24, and they only have 1 loss. And they're the other team like Charleston that is ranked from a smaller conference. And they won at FIU, and they won against North Texas this past week. And same thing as Charleston. If Florida Atlantic can keep winning, they'll stay in the top 25. But if they drop a game in conference play, they will definitely move back out. But I'm glad they're getting some recognition. Arkansas is at number 25, and they dropped 10 spots in the AP Top 25 poll. They have 5 losses, and they lost to Alabama, and they lost at Vanderbilt this past week. And Arkansas has some injured players right now, and that has really affected their play. But if Arkansas can get healthy and get back on track and start winning some games in the SEC again, then they can definitely move back up in the top 25 poll. But if they keep losing, then they'll drop out of the top 25. And Wisconsin, Missouri, San Diego State, and Duke all dropped out of the top 25 rankings for losing games this past week. And in the other team votes, NC State, St. Mary's, Arizona State, New Mexico, Illinois, San Diego State, Michigan State, Duke, Wisconsin, Creighton, Kent State, Boise State, Texas A&M, Ohio State, Missouri, VCU, Iowa, and North Carolina are all teams on the outside of the top 25 poll right now, but could definitely move back into the top 25 poll if they keep winning. Now, that is the Week 11 AP Top 25 poll in college basketball. There's been a lot of movement. This past week tied the record for the most AP Top 25 poll teams to lose. Over the weekend, there were 13 ranked teams that lost, so there's been a lot of parity in college basketball this season. There's around 40 or 50 teams in college basketball right now that you could argue be in the top 25. There's just a lot of teams that are really good, but it's kind of all jumbled together. No one's really separating themselves right now except the teams at the top. So there's a lot of parity in college basketball, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the rankings shake out as we move further into conference play. Comment down below what you think about the Week 11 AP Top 25 poll and what you think about the rankings and where the AP voters rank the teams. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below, and I'll see you next time.